Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 124th of Kouryer Podcast. Our today's guest is Mr. Kalen Chock. He's a senior concept artist at DreamWorks from Bay Area, California, United States. Now, with that quick introduction out of the way, give us a little introduction on how he got into visual arts and design.
Um, Shoots. Well, I mean, I never really thought I would be an artist, to be honest. Like, I kind of just got into it. Like, I wanted to be a soccer player or a football player for a long time. It wasn't until my senior year in high school where someone came to my high school and said, "Hey, you could do art for a living." So I drew as a kid, and I was like decent at it. Like, I could draw Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z for money, for like that was all I could. I could just look at something and I could copy it decently. It wasn't until my senior year of high school, someone came to my school, said, "Hey, you can go to school to be an artist." So I uh, I stopped doing football, and then I went to an art school, graduated, ended up getting a job at a local video game studio, and then the rest is kind of history. Then just kind of for the past 11 years, just been kind of grinding my way up the ladder of command in terms of just working with better people and better studios and that kind of stuff. And now currently the where I've landed is I'm currently working at DreamWorks as a visual artist on some other future projects. So life is good. I can't complain. I'm pretty blessed, and I'm just trying to kind of pay that back when I can, and just trying to live my life and just survive the pandemic as anyone else is, and just trying to just do my thing.
All right, awesome. That's a pretty positive outlook to have. I think anyone who's listening to this podcast can learn a thing or two. All right, so the next question is: were you originally studying art and design, or you were pursuing another career path? I mean, of course, you already mentioned that first. You were trying to be a professional soccer player, but when you were like, deciding on choosing like an art path, like as a career, were there any doubts or other decisions in your head at the time?
Oh yeah, I mean there were definitely times I thought I should quit. Like I wasn't sure if I was cut out for it, and that was mostly just because of kind of listening to people that were kind of negative, listening to kind of. And unfortunately, this is kind of the bad part about sometimes when you go to schools, you can have people that just doubt you. They're just like, "Hey, I don't," and they're not trying to be mean or anything, but they're just like, "Hey, I don't think you're cut out for this," or "I don't think you can do this. This is going to be a hard path to go down this route. So I don't know. Maybe we should just do something else that's easier." And so I had to be kind of stubborn a little bit. And I think when it comes down to artists, like only you know what you're capable of. You can listen to other people all you want, but only you can really know what's inside of you. So I had to kind of bet on myself a lot, especially in my later year, my final years of art school, to kind of be like, hey, I know that I may not be where I want to be in terms of my level yet and my skill level, but I know I can do it. I just need time. And so, luckily, I kind of bet on myself and didn't listen to other people, and I'm here where I am now. But yeah, I think what school did teach me, that taught me what I didn't want to do. I took classes on programming. I took classes on animating in 3D and texturing and rigging and all the other and level design, and it helped me kind of understand what the pipeline is, but then also understand I don't want to do that. So when I took my first background design and layout class, something just clicked in my head. And then, I asked my teacher, "Hey, can you get paid to do this?" And they're like, "Yeah, you can." And I was like, "All right, well, then that's what I want to do." And then once when I figured that out, then it was like, okay, I'm just going to keep doing that. So, fast forward 10 years of just drawing that all day long, you're eventually going to probably get competent at it and, figure some things out.
All right, awesome. And all right, in the introduction, I mentioned that you're senior concept artist at DreamWorks. But my question right now is, what is your main branch of design that you're focusing on right now? And tell us about your experience from the start of it until now. By branch of design, I mean like your position as an artist.
um, so I'm a little new actually to the DreamWorks family in terms of I've been freelancing with them for a good while. But this is kind of my first time being like a full time employee with them. So yeah, so like you said, I am a senior viz dev artist, but I don't think they really even have seniors. I think at that point you're just a viz dev. I don't think it even matters. But I mean, the way it normally works for me is I have directors and production designers and art directors, and for the most part, my day to day is kind of they come to me and they're like, "Hey, this is the part of the script in the movie that." we need help kind of figuring out what it looks like. We need you to figure this out. And so then my job is to then take what their descriptions are. Usually they're nice and they'll give you sketches, and that's really, really nice because, working with some of these OGs that I've worked on, like Iron Giant, like Sinbad, Prince of Egypt, Kung Fu Panda, like some of these older guys are just monsters in the animation scene. So they're just really good. So they'll give you these sketches and they'll draw over your work and they'll provide you with really good reference and they say, okay, go figure that out. And then I'll do my work and then they'll come back and say, okay, this not so much, this like I like this I drew over it. And so it's that's kind of like my kind of just loop that kind of goes on. And then eventually you have like a meeting with the main director and they kind of go yes, no, and then you just kind of just keep going until they kind of like whatever you're doing. So I just try to be a sponge in terms of just trying to really learn from some of the people above me that have been doing it a lot longer, in terms of just like they're just how they handle meetings, how they deal with directors, people that are above them, how they deal with executives. Just a lot of those all intangible things that are kind of non-art related, I think is really invaluable, that I'm very lucky to experience. Just some of those smaller things about how I should be thinking about art, in terms of just the approach and how I want to design it and show it to other people. It's been really, 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 really fun. I've been learning a lot.
All right, awesome. And how does your design process usually go anytime you want to start working on a new project, like whether it be a commission or the personal project? Like, what does the structure of your pipeline looks like?
I mean, that really depends on I think it really depends on the person and the client, and then also like what the subject matter is. So I think that's kind of an important thing about being a visual artist or a concept artist or whatever you want to call it. I think you have to be adaptable. So sometimes it's like I'll just do pencil sketches or pen sketches. Sometimes I'll just go straight into Photoshop and just paint something out just full color. Sometimes I'll just do line art. Sometimes I'll just do 3D, you know? It really depends on what the problem is and what the best tool is to make the solution. So right now currently I'm in Blender a lot, just doing these small little like rough 3D mockups and just painting over it, because that like solves the problem the best in terms of the director. Because like the directors, some of them like aren't artists sometimes. I mean, mine in particular is, but he doesn't care like in terms of, oh, did you paint it with charcoal, did you do it traditionally? It's like, did you just solve the problem? So as long as I can kind of visually get it, like visually like tell him like, okay, this is what I'm thinking, and he can understand it, then that's fine. And so, concept artists at the end of the day is just visual communication, right? We're trying to visually communicate what's in our head to them, and hopefully what we're both thinking of kind of lines up. So, my job sometimes, though I could go and do like this kind of like nice, super, amazing painting with all this texture and stuff like that. It's like I could easily just do this in 3D and just kind of paint over it. It gets the same idea across, and I'm not wasting time, right? I can then give that to our modeler. We can then figure that out for scale. You know what I mean? So right now I've been in Blender, but when I'm on other projects, sometimes I'm just painting straight up. So again, it's kind of just what does the person above me, how do they prefer to receive things, is kind of an important thing. um, so just knowing your boss is important, and then just knowing uh, what's the best way to communicate an idea. And sometimes that could be line art, sometimes that could be painting. So I don't think of it too much of like I have a set process. It's I try to know all the tools so that way I can pick and choose in that very moment to be adaptable.
All right, awesome. And actually, I had a question. What's been the biggest challenge for you working with Blender, like in terms of like dealing with the software and the learning curve of it?
Um, I think Blender, I think, is kind of a game changer. I mean, there's definitely this kind of like Blender cult. So I hate kind of saying that because everyone's like, get on Blender. And like, they're all kind of cultish in a way. And they know who they are. But I don't want to like kind of like try to put it on people. But I would say, as a person that went to art school in 2005 using like old school Maya and Max, and like I hated 3D in art school because it was just so like unintuitive. I was just like, I don't want to learn this. And they're like, you're gonna need this, Kalen. And I'm like, yeah, probably, but like I'll learn it when it's like easier to learn. I was just like, this isn't like, I was around when ZBrush came out, right? And my friends that took it obviously are amazing character artists now, but they're like, Kalen, check out the ZBrush. And I looked at it and I'm like, what the hell is this? This is like, this makes no sense. So I didn't want to touch it, right? So Blender is finally like that first program where like I look at it and like everything like makes sense to me, where I'm like, yeah, that's kind of how I think it should work. Where like Maya, in order to get like the simplest of things, you had to go through all this like steps of processes or whatever. Blender, you don't have to do that. It's free, so it's open source, so you can kind of customize what you want. There's all these cool plugins and stuff like that. So I think because it's made by the people, I think it really forces like the ingenuity to make it like really really efficient, and it's super small too. Like I mean, after using Maya for a long time, then I went to Blender. I was like, dude, this program's so small. Like I just run it off like my Dropbox, um, so I don't even like have it saved locally. Like I can go to like my computer at work. I can go to my computer at home. I can go to my computer like my laptop, and I can just run Blender, and it's gonna like run the same. So I took a Blender class, luckily, because I didn't know how to use it that well. So I ended up taking Von Ling's Blender class, and I didn't understand most of it at the time, but it definitely just gave me a space to kind of just mess up constantly and just kind of fuck up and then all that stuff. And then eventually, after his class, I was able to kind of I feel confident to kind of like explore on my own and figure things out, like on forums and whatnot. But I will say I also am very very privileged because I have some friends that are really good at Blender, that I call them the Blender Genie, because I just rub them and they're like, what question do you have? And I'm like, how do I do this? And they're like, oh, you do it that way. So a good example of that would be Ricardo Guimares. If you ever look him up, he has a class actually on CGMA, actually starting in a couple of weeks, and it's called concept art, Blender to concept art. So the class is all about like how to use Blender and concept art, and that guy's like really good. Like whenever I have a Blender question, like I go to that guy, and like he's just like, you could do it just like this, and I'm like, all right, cool. And then my other friend is Kevin Gnutzman, and he's an artist at Riot, and the same thing, that I could message him on Discord, because I'll try it and then I'll be like, I don't know what I'm doing, and I'll just message him and they'll be like, all right, here you go. So having a Blender friend is super 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 nice. But there are some forums and stuff like that. But in terms of like artists like complaining about it now, like y'all have no idea like the 3D programs we had to use back in the day, which sounds like a very old thing to say, but trust me when I say like you couldn't do half the things you could do now, and it wasn't nearly as easy. So like it
Yeah,
was a very like expensive thing. Like if you didn't have a good computer, if you weren't rich with the good computer, there's no way you're gonna do like 3D. So
yeah. I mean, that's one of the main things I keep hearing from everyone, and not just about like the expensiveness of it, because that could be easily solved. Don't hear it from me, but there's a certain pirate website, that you can download stuff off.
yeah, I mean
Yeah,
that's nice too, but even then, like but then the problem is every time it updates, you got to
yeah,
redo
yeah.
the pirating, all that kind of stuff, and then God forbid you start getting freelance. And I've had some people that have people have come down on them, for using pirated software,
Oh,
because it's all fun and games until you start actually working in the industry, and then they might come after you. So there's that. So then like having to do all that nonsense, and then sometimes with pirated software it doesn't work all the way because you don't have certain things that you would need if you had the free version. So like there's like, oh, you need this plugin. I'm like, oh, how do I download it? It's like, well, what's your license number? And I'm like, shit, I don't have one. So now I have to like, so it's just like it's always a pain. Whereas with Blender, it's just like it's free. You don't have to pirate anything, whatever. It's like you want to update, you just update it. Like there's no like, well, how do I repirate it? It's like having to constantly steal something over and over, it kind of gets exhausting. Versus like, hey, it's free, just have it and then just don't take whatever you want. So yeah, it's much more easier because I used to be in that boat of having like bootleg Photoshop, and then you have to constantly like keep up with it. It can kind of be mentally taxing.
yeah. I mean, and the thing is, even for Blender, I think I'm hearing from everyone in the community that even before the version 2.8, it was way harder to use with. It wasn't very user friendly or intuitive. And it's been kind of like recently, the past couple of years, this issue has been really
Oh
improved.
yeah, before I had friends, I had students that were like, Kalen, get on Blender, and they were showing me like 2.6, and I'm like, this is trash. But it wasn't until 2.8 where I was like, okay, I'll learn it now because now it's tight. But before 2.8, it did not look good. 2.9 now is like I use 2.9, like it's legit. But yeah, before that, 2.8 is what got people to be like, oh snap, this is like I don't have to use mine anymore. I can literally use this, and it's just as good.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, what you said about like people coming down on freelancers when it comes to like using pirated software, that's the first time I actually heard it. I mean, it makes sense for like countries like US or European countries or stuff like that. But I don't think that's really the case for freelancers like outside. Like from my home country, Iran, there's a lot of free artists freelancers that they work with top companies, and I assume you like 95% of them use pirated software, not because they're bad people or just want to pirate and just steal money from companies. It's because of the sanctions. There's no actual way to buy anything, legally.
Oh yeah, so yeah, depending on what country you on, depending on what country you live, like yeah, that can definitely not be like a worrisome thing. But in America, it's like you don't want to be in that situation where they like know where you are, like you have a tax ID, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, you don't want to be in a situation where you're creating stuff for money on pirated software. So for you guys, if that is the issue, then yeah, then I wouldn't worry about it. But yeah, for me, I always pay for convenience. So if I have to pay for something and it's gonna work, and then now I have like a support team and people that are liable if it doesn't work, then it's fine. Versus when something is like pirated and then they're like, it doesn't work. I'm like, well, who are you gonna call? You can't call them and be like, hey man, I stole your software and it's not working. Like, what the hell? They're gonna be like, what? You know what I mean? So sometimes for me at least, I like paying for stuff because then there's like a little bit of liability to it. And now I have like a support system that if things don't work, then so there's someone to answer to. I could be like, hey, I paid money for this, so you have to do this. Versus if you steal it, you're like, eh. So
Oh yeah, definitely. And all right, let's jump into the next subject, which is actually kind of an interesting question because I always get like pretty interesting answers out of it. What was the first art job paycheck you ever got, and what was it for, and how did you feel at the time when you got it?
so the question is, what is my first art job I ever had, like paid art job?
First paycheck
Uh,
you ever got from art, like it could be a freelance gig, it could be anything.
oh, okay. Um, shoot. The first one I did was working on some like Facebook game, and then I got fired like right away. It's like my very first one because like I didn't know like what being a concept artist was. So like they are like, oh, your work's good. We're gonna hire you for this anime like Facebook like little like Farmville game. And so I was like, all right, cool. Like I can do this. And then I did it, and then I was struggling, and then they're like, yeah, like it's not working out. And I was like, damn, I suck. So then I realized I'm like, oh, so I have to really like design things. I can't just paint pretty pictures. And then, yeah, that was kind of a hard pill to swallow. And then, um, I started working at a company called Crazy Pixel, and we were working on these like little like diner dash games. One was called Passport to Perfume. You could probably Google it. It's freaking terrible. But yeah, I got my first check from that, and it was cool. I was getting paid like $13 an hour. I thought I was living the dream. Um, which in America that's kind of like pretty low. Like it's like you could probably like work at like Costco or Chipotle and probably make more money. But at that point I was getting paid to do something that I trained for, so I was really happy about it. So yeah, so I think when I got my first like paycheck, like I got really scared when I first got the job because I was like, until I see that paycheck, it's not real, because you can do work and then they could be like, oh, I don't like it. I was always afraid someone's gonna like screw me over. But then once I got there, like in 2 weeks went by, and then I got my first paycheck, I was like, whoa, like this is crazy. Like it has the company name, has my name on it, and then they're like, okay, well now we have direct deposit where like it just comes into your account every 2 weeks. Then I was like, whoa, direct deposit. Like I don't have to even go to the bank anymore. Like it's just there. I just have to just show up and do my work. So, that was a really, really fun time. And then you get fired, or you not fired, but then you get laid off and all the other stuff. And you go through unemployment and you go through all those problems. But yeah, luckily I'm at a point now where I haven't had to deal with that in a very long time. um, and that's mostly just trying to like just work hard and improve my skill and go from there. But yeah, but the first check always hits different because I was working at Disneyland, face painting for a long time. Just having parents just like just berate you and stuff, and just having all this glitter and paint all over my face, while like Mickey Mouse is in the back just to like run around being stupid and like, oh bitch. It's just like, it's just like the happiest place on earth, right? But it's not like when you're in the back. So it's just dealing with like entitled kids and crying children and just all this stuff. So like, then going in the back, and you're just sitting there just chilling, and you see someone with like their helmet off, like the Goofy, and he's just smoking, and you're like, this is depressing. I need to get out of here. uh to where I was then, it was a big jump. So I was like super happy. It was a terrible place to work, but I was super happy. And it actually taught me to really appreciate nice things, because then when I got to a company that I was working at before, like Glue, where they feed you every day, they give you like free food every day. They'll have like parties and all this kind of stuff, and they take care of you, a good medical and whatever. So when you get to like nice companies where like I get my own desk, like it's like a whole, I'm not crammed, and stuff like that. I can bring my dog to work. I can work from home. Um, Places like that, when you get there, like you just really appreciate it, because you're like, wow, like I know what it was like to work at a small company where like the boss is like kind of like this evil villain. Versus people that are like, they respect you. It's definitely a nice thing. And DreamWorks has been pretty much the same thus far as well. They're very nice people, and it's very very nice to work there.
Yeah, actually, something about like the whole work culture environment. I think it's the companies that are like their environment and culture is like DreamWorks, as you mentioned, are usually going to stand a test of time. But a lot of companies, like even as we're seeing right now, like Blizzard right now, because of a lot of issues, it's kind of falling down in terms of like sales, and not just sales in everything. And I think like it's really important to for the boss, not just the bosses, the higher ups even in the company, to make the place feel like kind of like a family reunion or something, so everyone can kind of work better, communicate better and all that stuff. Sounds simple, but it's unfortunately not everywhere. But like unfortunately it's kind of the trend is going towards that, because people will slowly start to realize that, oh, actually people work better under these conditions if we kind of don't act like such a like evil overlords, as you said.
Yeah, it's kind of nice that I think the pandemic really kind of showed what people are capable of in terms of like working from home and not having someone be all over them all the time. And I think people were really kind of like afraid that, oh, we're gonna lose productivity if we let them work from home. We're gonna do all this stuff. But then we did, and then everyone was fine. And so it showed like, oh, if you let people kind of like, don't constantly berate them and constantly like, you know, just like if you let them have a day off every once in a while and keep the mental health where like the work family balance is like good, like, oh, all of a sudden, they're happy. And so that's like a really good thing. So then it turns out that people that are happy will tend to do better work because they're satisfied. So it's like, oh, if you treat them really, really nicely, then they don't necessarily mind staying a little bit later. Or they don't mind like some of the things that can happen with it. Um, Glue was a good example of that. Like they had a really good work family balance where they were like, "Hey, man, if it's too much traffic, if it's like if it's 2 hours to get here because of traffic, then just stay home and work." You know, they didn't care. They were like, "Hey, if you need to leave early, like fine, just get your work done." And so it set up this kind of culture level of trust that was like, as long as I'm getting my work done, I can go play 2 hours of football. If I get my stuff done, I can bring my dog to work. I can dip out early. Like, you know what I mean? Like if I need to go to a doctor's appointment, just go to a doctor's appointment and then just come back. So there's a level of like trust there that I really, really liked with them. And I think that everyone there was really happy. And you could tell because it was like free food and they treated you right. Our bosses worked, we call it the pit. They worked in the pit with us. Like they didn't have their own office. So like they were literally in there with us, like in the main office with us. So it always felt nice knowing that like the VP of the company is like literally right there. You can just go talk to him. So there wasn't like this like, oh, I have my own office, I'm better than you, or I'm, you know what I mean? It's like he's in the middle and you can see him. You can, like, you know what I mean? Like you can easily go talk to him. He's very approachable. So I liked when bosses do that. And so there's a level of like we're all in this together, and we're all kind of like I hate to use that word family or whatever, but like we're all on the same team. And so I think things like that can be positive when you're working in a studio where it can be kind of hectic sometimes.
All right, that sounds really awesome. And all right, let's jump into the next question, which is considered to be one of the like the hardest questions of the podcast. Don't worry, it's nothing personal or anything, but you'll get the point when I say it. Who are your favorite artists and designers that have inspired you the most?
Favorite artists and designers. I'll probably just go by the ones that have inspired me, like in just in my life, in terms of where I was in my life. So I would say someone like Edgar Cardona. Edgar Cardona. You can look him up. I think his Instagram is like gay vegan guy because he's gay. It's like gay vegan apex guy. I think is what it's called. I forget what his name is, but he's a really good artist. And um, when I didn't know what I wanted to do in art, I I saw him drawing one day on a Wacom tablet. I didn't know what a Wacom tablet was, and I just saw him drawing this like amazing like tree, and I was like, "Did you just do that?" And he's like, "Yeah," and I was like, "What the?" And I was like, "Dude, that's so amazing!" And I was like, "Can you show me how to do that?" And he was like, "Sure." So then I was just following him around because I was like, "Yo, show me how to paint, like show me how to do something." And so we became like pretty good friends. And I didn't even know he was gay at the time. And it was just kind of funny because then when he like came out to me, I he thought I was gonna like not want to talk to him, and he was like, "Hey man, I'm gay," and I was like, "All right," and he's like, "You don't care?" And I was like, "Well, you can still show me how to paint," and he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "All right, then we're good. Like, don't even worry about it." And ironically, I never really had any gay friends before, but it also taught me a lot about just what he was going through and some of his struggles, and just being more tolerant of other people, of being tolerant of the LGBTQT. I forget the letters, but
LGBTQ. That's
yeah,
fine.
sorry, there's a lot of letters there, and I always mess them up. But it is telling me to be more tolerant, and I just found a lot of common ground with him, and he was really influential in my life in terms of showing me like just the raw passion of painting. He had that, and he was so naturally good. He's a guy that like he's so good, but I feel like he doesn't even try. Like I feel like he was always like there's artists like that where like I gotta try my hardest to do good art. I feel like he just wakes up and he's just like, look what I drew, and then I'm like, what? And it's like he's like, oh yeah, I guess like it almost it looks very effortless when I watch him paint. It's really weird. Um, and he could do a lot of amazing things, but he just wants to chill and whatever. He could easily be an art director at like some of the biggest companies, but because he likes to just chill and he just doesn't want to be stressed out, I'm like, all right, cool. He's living his life and he's happy. Second person would be Anthony Jones, also known as Robot Pencil. He was the second guy that I met in art school. So it was him and Edgar and AJ were like my two good friends that I was constantly hanging out with. And AJ is a really hard worker because I knew him when he couldn't draw for anything. He couldn't draw at all. Like he didn't have any art experience, like literally any. But then you see how he is now. If you know who he is, you look up his work. He's amazing, and he's a big inspiration to me because of just his work ethic. He just worked really, 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 really hard, and now he is where he is now, working for some of the biggest companies. So, also a really good friend. He was in my wedding. He's one of my groomsmen. Someone that I just really look up to in terms of his work ethic and who he is as a person. He's always been there for me, so I really look up to him. Second person I would say would be a 3D artist. That would be Daniel McGowan. He works over at Blizzard now on the Overwatch team, if I'm not mistaken. Really good 3D artist, and I just loved his work ethic. When he was in art school, he already had a kid that was special needs, and he wasn't. I think he was married. I wasn't sure if he was married yet. He got his girlfriend pregnant really early, so he had a kid that was special needs, had a daughter on the way. Um, and he was selling cars, like part-time selling cars while going to art school full time, while taking care of his kids and being a husband. It was crazy. Like I was like, I don't know how this guy does it. And he would sleep in his car sometimes because like he lived kind of far away from school. So if he had class at night, then he would sleep in his car so he could go to class in the morning because it was too far to drive back home. So there were times where he would just sleep on my floor at my house because I lived pretty close to the school. And then he would just go like he was a machine. And I would be like, dude, and I would tell him, I'd be like, dude, what if you don't make it? Like, what happens if you don't get a job? And in his mind, it was like, there's no option. Like, I can't not get a job. I have to get a job. And so just seeing how committed he was to his family, and just like how motivated he was to like make sure that he didn't mess up because he had so many people relying on him, is something that like I've always taken a lot of inspiration from. And like I still look up to him as like a family man. Like I see how he is with his wife and his kids, and I'm like, that's the kind of guy. Like if I ever had kids, like I want to be that kind of guy for my family. That like I'm gonna do whatever it takes to make sure that they have a roof over their head and they're fed at night. And so it makes it's no coincidence that he is where he is now at a company, and he does amazing work and a super nice dude. So um I don't think but nice things to say about Daniel McGowan. Is one of my favorite guys. So I did Edgar, AJ, Edgar, AJ, and Daniel. The third person might, I think the two other people would be my previous art directors. That would be Josh Singh and Magnus Holmo. And Josh Singh was my art director over at Wave Dash when we were working on a fighting game. And I love Josh because he just took a lot of confidence in me to kind of just let me do what I wanted to do. And then Magnus was one of my favorite art directors because he kind of taught me the business side about things, about when I wanted to implement like features in a game or I wanted to do something. He always had this very practical approach about things. And so, and he is the person that also played soccer, played football as well. So we played a lot of soccer together. So we grew kind of close through that. But he was also like a really good artist because he understood like the business aspect, the business part of things, about how art translates in terms of like how much things going to cost, that kind of stuff in terms of implementing things. Really smart guy that I still talk to this day. And then the last my favorite artist probably currently right now is probably Chris Copeland and Justin Copeland. They're the Copeland brothers. They're the ones that are the current directors of a new DreamWorks movie that I'm currently working on. And they were the ones that kind of reached out to me and said, "Hey, I want you to be part of this team." And they do amazing work. If you've never seen some of their storyboards, they're so good. And so just having them kind of just be behind me and support me, really cool. Just to be a part of that and just to see how down to earth they are. And so you'll find out that a lot of these really good artists are just really cool people in general. It's no surprise that they're really good and they're really nice. So those are probably the biggest artists right now that have currently kind of like influenced my life in a very positive direction that I still probably am very indebted to for a while. So
All right. And any advice and tips for a good portfolio and resume for an upcoming artist? Like, since you have a lot of like industry experience, I don't ask this question to any guest, but since you already have a lot of experience in the industry, I think this would be a good time.
um in terms of like what people look for in a portfolio, I think you kind of have to ask the question to yourself of like, where do you want to be, you know? And I think when you can figure out where you want to be and what you want to do, that question of what you should put in your portfolio should kind of answer itself. I always kind of give the analogy of like a chef, right? Like if I want to be a chef that works in like a kebab place, right, making like the best kebab in the world, what would I want to like show them to get hired to work in that kebab place? Would I want to show them like burgers and sushi? Like probably not. I wouldn't show them Mexican food. I would show them like just different versions of like badass kebab that I can make that would be like, dude, I'm the best kebab person you can possibly think of. And they go, okay, we're gonna hire you for that. Um, I think a portfolio needs to be tailored to what you want to do. You know what I mean? So like I didn't put characters in my work. I didn't put anything else in my work. I just put environment. That's exactly what I wanted to do. And I want to do these kind of environments. So then I found companies that did that and I tried to go after that. And then when I couldn't find stuff like that, I still kept doing what I wanted to do anyway. And then someone said, "Hey, whatever you do is what we want to do. So can you do that for us?" So I think knowing where you want to go kind of answers that question. So like if you want to be at Blizzard, right, you got to draw a lot of orcs and spikes and like, big stylized things. You're not going to have photo bash Last of Us like, environments, right? Because it doesn't translate over. So I think a lot of it is like, what do you want to do? Do you want to be a matte painter? Do you want to work in movies? Do you want to work in animation? Your portfolio should just kind of display that. And then to get more like detailed and concrete about it, I would say in order to even be better with your portfolio is to understand the pipeline. So if you can understand the pipeline about how things work, then you can design your work in your portfolio to be like, hey, my work will help your pipeline get better. My work can fit in this pipeline very, very easily. So if that involves doing like 3D models or like doing color keys and that kind of stuff, I think it's important as an artist, you should know how does your art affect the team? You know what I mean? So how does your art affect animation? How does your art affect modeling? How does your art affect level design? So if you can display your art in a way that can affect those things positively, I think that's a good thing. Like if you can say, like you should be able to go, oh, if I'm doing this for like my level designer, I need to be able to design my art in a way that explains how the player will go through the level and where they can cover and where they and what things are interactable, what things aren't interactable. If I have to work with the modeler, I should be able to draw things in different angles so they can model it and texture it. If I'm doing things for animators, then I need to be able to draw a little, frame by frame how someone's going to jump or how this effect is going to work. If I'm going to work with the storyboard artist, I need to, draw little panels to kind of figure out the perspective and the camera working. If I'm doing stuff for the director and I need to be a full on illustration, then I got to do all these other things. So I think just knowing how your work fits in the pipeline and knowing how you can, because our job at the end of the day is to make everyone's life easier. And if you're just painting pretty pictures, like that's cool. But like I said earlier, right, I'm in Blender not because I'm trying to like look cool, but because it's going to solve the problem that we have right now. It's going to make everyone's life easier. So I think as a in terms of your work, you should be thinking about what problem does it solve. Does it solve a problem in terms of like the blue sky phase? Does it solve a problem for your modeler? Does it solve a problem for your animator? And I think if you can figure out how to make your portfolio that shows that you can solve any problem, that to me is like a good portfolio. Because I know I can hire this person. I know that if my modeler has an issue, that person can then concept stuff that will help the modeler. Because like nothing sucks when you have a concept artist that does something and the modeler's like, how do I model that? Like, what the hell is that? Right? And they're like, well, I don't know. It looks pretty though. And I'm like, that's great, but we can't model that. So you got to think about the pipeline. So understanding the pipeline, understanding how your work helps people, understanding where you want to be. Those are kind of like the three questions that you need to ask yourself that will make your work a lot stronger. And also working with constraints. I think a lot of artists tend to just draw whatever the hell they want. It's never how it works. You always have constraints, whether it's budget, animation, like, polygons. There's always some kind of constraint. Working with constraints is good because it forces you to have to be clever about how you solve a problem.
Those were some really, really important tips. I might actually clip this part, for even a special video, especially when you mentioned the whole like analogy of like, when you want to get hired in a kebab restaurant, you don't go make like, for example, like tacos for them. You just make them all the variations of badass kebabs you can do.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think, yeah, I'll definitely clip this. No, it's really good. Thanks.
I mean, you can make tacos. Maybe they're like, dude, we should do a taco kebab fusion, and maybe that's something cool. But I mean, in
Yeah.
general, your food should be like I call it like a menu. Your food should be like a food menu, and whatever it's like, you have your appetizers, your sketches, like your entree, which is like your colored things, and then you have like your desserts, some little things you can do extra. The person should look at that and be like, that's what I'm hungry for. If someone's hungry for tacos and then you hand them a kebab menu, they're like, what, yes, this isn't what I wanted. So you kind of want your portfolio to be kind of a menu that what they're hungry for, that's what you're going to give them, and they're going to be like, oh, they have everything that I want here. This is what I want to get. So it isn't as confusing as people think it is. Some people kind of overthink a portfolio. It's like just do what they want. Like just ask them. And if you don't know, that's when going to events will help you. You go to events, you talk to recruiters, talk to art directors, like ask them like, what do you want? And a lot of them just look at the artists that currently work there and look at what they're doing. And I'm like, all right, I'll just do that.
Yeah, definitely. That's actually also another good tip. Like, it's not necessarily doesn't work with art fields. Like, even in just most of the fields, like even let's say programming or, wanting to get a job at like, I don't know, like just as like an example, like Facebook, and you go to an event, like maybe there's a tech meetup or something, and you start talking to people. And sometimes, people will say, hey, when you talk to them, you realize, what they need, or sometimes just straight up you can ask if the context is right, of course. Like you don't go randomly ask people, hey, what do you need? Like, no, I mean, the context should be there as well. I mean, of course. And you can actually get a lot of insight, like, how you can fit in the mold of the place you want to work. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times when you go to these art events, like the best part about it, because sometimes if you're not in the United States, you're not near with someone, right? Cold emailing someone or messing someone on Instagram, being like, "Hey, what do you think, or like, what should I do, right? That can be kind of annoying. It happens to me all the time. People ask me all the time, and they're like, hey, like, what do you think? And I'm like, dude, I don't want to. If I answer you, I got to answer everybody, and I want to like have a life. But when you go to these events that are art events, people go there for that reason, to answer those questions. Recruiters go there and directors go there because they want to interact with you and they want to see what you have to show them. And they're literally paid to go there to answer your questions. So it's like, that's why going to those events can be useful, because then it's like they're literally paid to be there to like for you to like to get your questions out. So it's like you go to events like CTN or Lightbox or Trojan Horse Unicorn, whatever's in Europe right now. You go to those events because you're going to meet the big artists and you're going to ask them questions, and hopefully they'll give you the good answers, and it's good networking. You'll meet other good people. Um, it's just a good time usually to go at least do it every once in a while, but then obviously you go back and you just work on your stuff and get good. So then those contacts can eventually help you over time.
All right, and we've reached the final section and question of the podcast, which is called final words. And all right, I'm going to explain what it means. So imagine you have a limited amount of time, and in that limited amount of time, you can leave people who are listening to this podcast with a message or any messages from a human to other human beings, like that might be listening to this episode. And it could be about anything, by the way, like it could be life advice or anything. But in this limited amount of time, what would you say to the listeners?
Um, hmm. There's definitely a lot of things. Trying to think of what I can possibly give as advice. Let me see here. Let me think. Let me think. Um, all right. So my brother recently retired from the Air Force, and so my brother is a F-16 pilot, and so he's done a lot of tours in Iraq and a lot of stuff like that, and he's really well decorated. And when he retired, he told me something. He's older than me, right? He's a very wise guy, a very smart person. He said, you can either spend time or you can invest time. And something that really, really stuck with me, that he's like, you can spend your days online yelling at people, arguing with stuff and whatnot, or you can invest time. You can learn a new skill. You can invest time to make yourself better. He's like, there's always something that you can do. And so I choose to kind of invest time or try to think about that. So you don't really see me on Facebook that much. I don't really post that. I mean, I post like stories on Instagram, but like I'm not really like, you don't really see me in very many arguments on like art Twitter and stuff like that. Because to me, it's a waste of my time. So I choose to invest time. And so I always try to make sure that what I'm doing in my life is someone that's benefiting me or my family in the long run. And that's kind of how I try to live my life. And so I encourage you people, to anyone listening, to just invest your time and think about whatever time you have, whether it be an hour or days, how can you properly invest that to just better your life? So I think that's a good thing to do. The next thing I would think about, my brother taught me, was accountability. And so I always say, take accountability for every art brushstroke that you do. Um, and so and things that may seem inconsequential, this, like decisions that you make that can be very inconsequential when you're first designing, can have grave impacts. And I think that can be said for painting and in life. A lot of times artists kind of go through the motions and they kind of do something and they're kind of like, whatever, and they don't take accountability for it. They don't go, oh, that's wrong, I need to fix it. And so then those things, though they're very, very small mistakes throughout your painting and throughout your drawing and throughout your modeling, they add up over time and it can cause a bigger mistake down the line. And so I would say accountability, to take accountability for your work. Like if something is wrong, you need to own up to it and fix it. And that's one thing that I've always tried to do. And it's hard to be accountable for your work, to be like, you know what, this is a bad drawing or this is not my best. I need to do it again. And a lot of artists don't want to do that, especially younger artists, because it's definitely like an ego. You have to put your ego aside. But being accountable for every brushstroke that you make and for every design choice that you make will make you a better artist. And again, you never know the dire consequences that can have down the pipeline, that your mess up can affect somebody else's possible job, their livelihood. So I always say, just take accountability, and that goes for life too. Any decision that you think that can be very just like mundane and not important, you never know the ripple that it creates. So any decision that I try to make, I try to make sure that I think about it and I take my time. And I try to make sure that I understand that whatever I do, however dumb or lame that I think that is, whenever like a art or a director would ask me to do something like, "Hey, can you do this?" I wouldn't think, "Oh, I'm too good for this," or like, "No, I shouldn't have to do that. That's dumb." It's like, no, I don't know. Solving this task may actually be really beneficial for someone down the line, so I need to do it. So take accountability and check your ego at the door. And then the last thing I would say is just raise while you climb. It's a very common saying. So that just means that as you're climbing this ladder of success, or getting the job, help people below you. Um, I have been helping people get jobs and get gigs since the past like 8 years of my life. And 8 years ago, I was a nobody. So even though I was a nobody, I was still helping people no matter where I could go, and I still help people to this day. And so as I'm climbing the ladder of success and as I'm getting better gigs or getting better projects, I will always make sure that I can help someone that is going through it that maybe needs help. I will always do my best to say, hey, if this person's ready for it, like I helped one of my friends get a job at Riot because I was like, someone asked me like, hey, can you do this job? I was like, no, I can't. But here's this guy that I think would be a really good fit for you guys. Here's his contact. And now he's like working for them and he's doing a great job. He's like, oh, thank you. And you didn't have to do that. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't have to, but it's good. And, like you're a good person. I've known you for a while. I think this is a good opportunity, and that can be like that for anybody. So being nice to everyone is always a good thing because when someone needs someone for a job, are you the first person that comes in their mind? And hopefully so, if you're a nice person. If you're not, then they're gonna be like, nah, F that guy. So yeah, so being accountable and raising while you climb, and don't be stingy with your information. It takes a village to get where you are in life. I'm very lucky. I'm far from perfect. I'm very lucky, but anyone that looks at any level of success will tell you that doors were opened for me that were not open for other people, but I had to be able to walk through them. So I had to take the choice to walk through those doors, but I'd be lying to you if I said that I got here completely on my own, because that wasn't the case. A lot of doors and a lot of opportunities were awarded to me that weren't awarded to others. So I owe it to the community to try to open some of those doors to someone else that may not have opportunities. So I'm far from perfect, and it takes a village. I'm a accumulation of like all the other artists that have helped me, from Edgar to AJ to Dan McGowan to Josh and them. All the artists have influenced me to make me the artist I am today. It takes a village to kind of like do this. So if you're trying to do it on your own, it's going to take a while. So invest in your community. Your community will invest in you. We're kind of all in this together. So um, don't try to do it on your own. I mean, you can, but it's I realized there's so many times where I could have easily failed if I didn't have those friends that were there to kind of help me out when I needed it. Yeah. But at the end of the day, though, it all kind of relies on you and the hard work you put in. But it's okay to have those friends help you out when needed. And that's the
All
last thing.
right. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. Where can people contact you if they had any questions? Is your Instagram okay?
Um, yeah, the Instagram is fine. Instagram and Twitter is usually where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll see me posting random football videos and things that are not in my Call of Duty videos, things that are totally not unrelated. So I apologize. But yeah, that's where you can find me if you ever need to hit me up.
All right. Awesome. Thank you to anyone who tuned in and listened or watched this episode. I hope you are having a fantastic day. And if there's any critiques or comments or suggestions, just leave them out in the comment section, whether on Castbox, YouTube, or Instagram. You can just DM it to me on my Kouryer Podcast Instagram page. That is always fun. I'll read them all. And again, thank you so much for coming by. And thank you to anyone who tuned in. Take care, everyone. Till next episode. Bye.
Thanks.